couldn't have gotten to the chimes if I'd tried. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Okay, is that better? Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. Delighted to see you all here. I'm Nancy Hirschadder. I'm service coordinator this morning. I've been a part of the congregation since 2010. And I'm so glad that you're able to join us this morning. Each one of you is an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or 1,000th Sunday in our midst, I tried to figure out how old you would have to be here 1,000 times. In person or online, good morning online folks, and we are stronger because each of you is with us. As we gather this morning, we respectfully acknowledge that I obviously forgot to turn my sound off, that our physical building is on the traditional land, unceded land of the Paugussett people. And as a congregation, we are exploring ways to strengthen and develop our relationship with the Paugussett tribe who are based on Golden Hill and Trumbull. Before we get started this morning, I invite you to greet your neighbors, both those who are familiar to you and those who are new. Say hello, introduce yourself. Okay. And now for a few announcements. Today we welcome Chris Bolster as our guest speaker. Chris is a worship associate at UU Meriden and teaches English at the University of Connecticut, where he's completing his doctoral dissertation on cognition, metaphor, and early modern theater. He lives in Wallingford with his wife and their 4-year-old son. Welcome, Chris. Today, after the service, you are all invited. After service, we'll have a holiday party for all ages. The tree will be set up by then with music, food, and time together decorating our fellowship hall. Please come celebrate with us. If this is your first time here, or your 100th, and you have some questions about UUCD, please come to the Connections Corner with your coffee for a quick check, and that will be over in that corner. A member of the membership committee and the board of trustees or the board of trustees will be in the front corner by the chimes to answer or speak with you. Coming up this week on Tuesday, Spiritually Speaking at 7 on Zoom. Chair exercise class on Wednesday at 2. And on Sunday, December 8th, Reverend Tony Lorenzen will lead the service on the repair of patriarchy. Reverend Tony reflects on religion's treatment of gender, UU history on the inclusion of women, and the future of spirituality. Also next Sunday, December 8th, caregivers of LGBTQIA and young people will meet at 11:30. Choir rehearsal will begin at 11:45. Also, very important message from Darlene. The Worthy Now holiday cards. Would you like to spread holiday cheer to some of the nearly 2,000 UUs currently experiencing incarceration in the United States? Join Darlene Anderson Alexander, who's currently a Free World pen pal through the Worthy Now Prison Ministry Network of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, following the service next Sunday on the 8th. To do just that, there will be a table set up in the lobby. Oh, I'm sorry, in the front of the sanctuary, near the chimes. Where they're going to put it, I have no clue. With all the materials and guidelines necessary for you to write simple messages of hope and peace to our incarcerated siblings in faith. You're welcome to write your message during coffee hour or grab and go. The materials to take home. All holiday greetings must be mailed by Monday the 16th. Thank you for living out your UU values in a simple yet impactful way this holiday season. You can contact Darlene, and her email is in your order of service if you have any question. And that's it for our announcements today. Please join me in the words for lighting our chalice. And
Maisie can come up.
Maisie will be lighting our chalice this morning. Welcome, Maisie. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and justice is its light. This is our covenant to dwell together in peace, to help seek the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. Please join in body or spirit as you are able, and join us in our hymn of welcome 1008. When our heart is in a holy place, words will be on the screen.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and a God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Good to see you all this morning. So good to be in community. Let's say our words of our children's affirmation. They're on the screen. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. I want to tell you about a t-ball game, a story from storyteller Bill Harley. If you aren't familiar with t-ball, you'll need to know that it's a game like softball, but with gentle rules for 5 to 8-year-olds, kids just starting out. Now, the particular t-ball team Bill described had a girl we'll call Tracy on it. Tracy was not a natural at t-ball, but she came every week, even though she wasn't very good. She tried hard. She just never hit the ball, not once. Never came close. Everyone on both sides of the game cheered for her anyway. The last game of the season, Tracy came up to bat, and through some fluke, she creamed the ball, smoked it right up the middle through the legs of the 17 players who had all come in close, expecting an easy out. Kids dodged as the ball went by or looked absent-mindedly as it rolled, unstopped, heading into center field. When Tracy saw what she had done, she stood at home plate, delighted at her feat. "Run!" yelled her coach. "Run!" Her parents were on their feet screaming. All the other parents rose too. "Run, Tracy, run, run!" Tracy turned and smiled, and then, happy to please, galumphed off to first base. "Keep going, Tracy, keep going," yelled the first base coach. Happy to please, Tracy headed to second. By the time she was halfway to second, 7 members of the opposition had reached the ball and were passing it among themselves. The ball began to make its long journey home. Tracy headed to third. Adults fell out of the bleachers. Go, Tracy, go! Tracy reached third and stopped. But she was very close to her parents now, and she got the idea. Tracy started for home. Then it happened. During the excitement, no one had noticed the 12-year-old geriatric mutt that had lazily settled itself down in front of the bleachers 5 feet from the third base line. As Tracy rounded third, the dog, awakened by the screaming, sat up and wagged its tail at Tracy as she headed towards home. The tongue hung out, the mouth pulled back in an unmistakable canine smile, and Tracy stopped right there. Halfway home, 30 feet from a legitimate home run. Tracy looked at the dog. Her coach called, "Come on, Tracy, come on home." The crowd cheered, "Go, Tracy, go." She looked at all the adults. She looked at her own parents, shrieking and catching it all on video. She looked at the dog. The dog wagged its tail. She looked at her coach. She looked at home plate. She looked at the dog. Everything went in slow motion. She went for the dog. It was a moment of complete stunned silence. And then perhaps, not as loud, but deeper, longer, more heartfelt, everyone applauded as Tracy fell to her knees to hug the dog. 2 roads diverged on a third base line. Tracy went for the dog. So, I know, why not? I wonder. So ends the story. I'm going to invite, we have a missing basket for our food collection this morning, and that's okay, because we'll have lots of hands to help. And we can always come back in and get the extras later. And in the meantime, Nell, would you like to come light our lantern? Okay. Let's sing This Little Light of Mine. We'll still come around and get what we can. Go ahead. Okay, good.
Little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine.
We make this time and place holy simply by being together with each other. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. This time of sharing milestones is a time of coming together as a community in quiet contemplation, a time when we can offer healing and hope, and a time for giving thanks and offering gratitude for blessings great and small. In order to create this space for each other, we refrain from making announcements or sharing political opinions. If you're with us online, please write your milestones in the chat if you wish us to share them. I invite those of you who wish to share silent milestones by placing stones in the water to come forward now and do so.
morning. This poem that I'm going to read is called Short Order Cook. And before I read it, I'm curious, has anyone here ever worked as a short order cook? No? What about a line cook or in a kitchen, restaurant kitchen of any kind? I see a few of you. You all might especially appreciate this poem. I'm curious, maybe you can tell me during coffee hour if you've had any experiences similar. An average Joe comes in and orders 30 cheeseburgers and 30 fries. I wait for him to pay before I start cooking. He pays. He ain't no average Joe. The grill is just big enough for 10 rows of 3. I slap the burgers down, throw 2 buckets of fries in the deep fryer, and they pop, pop, spit, spit, psss. The counter girls laugh. I concentrate. It's the crucial point. They're ready for the cheese. My fingers shake as I tear off slices. I toss them on the burgers. Fries done. Dump. Refill buckets. Burgers ready. Flip into buns. Beat the melting cheese. Wrap the burgers in plastic. Into paper bags. Fries done. Dump. Fill 30 bags. Bring them to the counter. Wipe sweat on sleeve. And smile at the counter girls. I puff my chest and I bellow. 30 cheeseburgers. 30 fries. I grab a handful of ice, toss it in my mouth. I do a little dance, and I walk back to the grill. Pressure, responsibility, success. 30 cheeseburgers, 30 fries.
It's now time for our congregational offering. If this is your first time with us, please feel free to let the basket go by because your presence is your gift to us. When you give your time and energy to the work of this congregation, when you donate to our financial support, you're giving gifts to each other. Each one gives to and receives gifts from all our members and friends, and together we give to the community around us. To make your gift this morning, you may use the link or QR code that's posted in the chat or projected on the screen. You may also mail a check to UUCD at 24 Clapboard Ridge Road in Danbury. And thank you for your generosity. There.
Things have been so overwhelming recently. Everyone these days is always staring at their phones. I never have enough time. Any of this sound familiar? I'm sure that it does. This morning, I invite you to explore with me the power of presence as a radical act of compassion in the world. And I'm going to approach the idea of presence from several different perspectives, several different angles, if you will. My name is Chris Bolster. My pronouns are he, him. This is my first time visiting UUCD, though I grew up not far from here in New Milford, and I earned an MA in English and taught courses at WestCon just down the road from here. Very happy to be here today in this beautiful space. I'm a worship associate at UU Meriden, Tony's other family. I guess we could think of it that way. I teach English at the University of Connecticut, where I'm completing my doctoral dissertation on Shakespeare. For those who know something about dissertations, help. I started my dissertation work with really ambitious plans about what I would tackle. You know, I was going to revolutionize my field. So obviously this process has been quite the lesson in humility for me. Humility is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Today starts the monthly theme of presence. And so I'm going to talk about the stillness, the compassion, and yes, perhaps the humility that's necessary in order to be really present for someone. To listen can be a gift. To offer silent support can be a comfort. But if, despite our best intentions, we miss the mark, causing harm rather than help, it's often because of a lack of mindful presence. How much damage we can do when we speak thoughtlessly. I'll tell you a story about something I said very recently that made me feel like a real jerk. I was a jerk, I'll admit it. Hopefully it doesn't lower your opinion of me too much. This portion of the sermon, I've got, I think, 4 or 5 portions. Each one I've given a little mini title. So this title is called My Failure to Be Present in a Social Situation. I mentioned briefly my struggles concerning my dissertation. It's become something of a joke between me and my wife that I'm going to drop out of school and do something else, just something different, anything. I'm not really going to. It's just our way of laughing about a situation that's frustrating in different ways for both of us. New plan, quit my program and begin a degree in amusement park engineering. New plan, quit my program, become an ice sculptor. New plan, UU minister. You get the idea. I was at a holiday fair and we were at a stand where a balloon artist was twisting balloons into fun shapes for the kids. And when he made one for my son, who's 4 years old, I chatted with him, the artist, for a moment about his work making balloon animals. Oh, you've been doing this for how long? Oh, you say it's not that hard to start. You can make a dog with just a little bit of practice. Oh, that's cool. As he handed my son the really cool balloon creation he made, I jokingly told my wife, and maybe some of you can see where this is going, and not in a quiet voice either, okay, Kim, that's it. I'm going to drop out of school and make balloon animals instead. But as soon as I heard myself say this, it was one of those open mouth, insert foot kind of moments, right? Chris, what were you thinking? Why did you say that? To me, this was a reference to a joke that my wife and I have shared about the difficulties of finishing a dissertation. And while I don't know how exactly this guy interpreted my comment, the obvious interpretation, as I was highlighting this difference in status between us and poking some kind of fun at his job. A job that, yes, it's true, probably doesn't require much in the way of a formal education. But what kind of jerk would say something like that? Turns out, this one. So I don't know if my words did harm. Even if they didn't, though, they could have. And they were a really poor reflection on me. And if my words did do harm, it really didn't matter if I had the best of intentions or if I see myself as a nice guy. In that moment, I was not present. I wasn't thinking about the person to whom I was speaking. It's not like I was staring at my phone. It's not that kind of presence that I'm talking about. That kind of presence is a problem too, often. I wasn't distracted in that way, but I wasn't really present. I was thinking about myself, not the person to whom I was speaking. It would have been better for me to have simply stayed silent. Now, this next portion is called An Exercise in Presence and Active Listening. And I realize that I have one more apology I need to make because I should have warned the Zoom folks, and I see there's some ahead of time, and the person who manages the Zoom, that I'm going to be inviting you all to partner up in just a moment and share something with one another. And that might be difficult for the person who's coordinating the Zoom. There might have to be something with breakout rooms that happens in order to put people in couples or pairs. Or if that's not possible, then those folks on Zoom may need another alternative, like, for instance, a silent mindfulness exercise or meditation. So I apologize again for my lack. The thing about lacking presence is you have to say I'm sorry quite a bit. I'm going to read from the work of Parker J. Palmer, who's an author and educator who's written extensively about education, community, and spirituality. This is from his article, The Gift of Presence, The Perils of Advice. My misgivings about advice began with my first experience of clinical depression about 35 years ago. The people who tried to support me had good intentions, but for the most part, what they did left me feeling more depressed. Some went for the nature cure. Why don't you get outside and enjoy the sunshine and the fresh air? Everything's blooming. It's such a beautiful day. Well, when you're depressed, you know intellectually that it's beautiful out there, but you can't feel a bit of that beauty because your feelings are dead, and being reminded of that gap is depressing. Other would-be helpers tried to spruce up my self-image. Why so down on yourself? You've helped so many people. But when you're depressed, the only voice you can hear is one that tells you that you're a worthless fraud. Those compliments deepened my depression by making me feel that I defrauded yet another person. If he knew what a worm I am, he'd never speak to me again. Here's the deal, writes Palmer. The human soul, and I'm adding my own editorialized often here, or a sometimes, not an always. The human soul often doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, to be seen, heard, and companioned exactly as it is. When we make that kind of deep bow to the soul of a suffering person, our respect reinforces the soul's healing resources, the only resources that can help the sufferer make it through. And the writer goes on to talk about how the only thing that really helped during this period of depression in his life was a man who would come over at the same time every day, 4 p.m., and massage his feet and just silently be there and massage his feet for a few minutes. So what I want to do now, you might think of as a kind of mindfulness exercise. For this exercise, everyone's going to talk to a partner, and ideally this will be a person who you didn't come here with today, someone from outside of your family circle or your own community. So to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, you're going to share with each other about what you did for Thanksgiving. Now, maybe your Thanksgiving was fun. Maybe it was the kind of perfect Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving, right? I don't know. Maybe your Thanksgiving was great, but it definitely wasn't the traditional Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving. Maybe it was just you and your partner at home. Maybe you like it that way. Maybe you made turkey. Maybe you went to the movies and ate Chinese food, which was the Thanksgiving Day tradition of a friend of mine growing up. Maybe there were challenges or obligations that interfered with your Thanksgiving. Maybe you had to work. Maybe there were long hours of travel involved. Maybe it was just you and your partner at home and you didn't like it that way. Maybe your Thanksgiving was hard. Maybe there were family conflicts, or maybe your patience was tested. Maybe you felt belittled or small. Maybe your Thanksgiving was marked with loss. Maybe there was an empty chair at your table that perhaps wasn't empty last year. Maybe your Thanksgiving was something else entirely and looked absolutely nothing like any of the Thanksgivings that I've described so far. So no matter what your Thanksgiving looked like, you'll have the compassionate attention of another person for 2 minutes. When your partner's speaking, you'll give them your full attention, your full presence. You'll listen as compassionately as possible, but ideally in silence. Just notice what it feels like to simply listen. You might notice an impulse arising to interject or to move the story along or offer advice. That's normal, but today I'd like you to simply listen, simply witness. After 2 minutes, I'll call for you to switch partners. So go ahead and find a partner. Maybe some movement is necessary. Okay, that is 2 minutes. So if you haven't switched yet, please give the other person a chance to share about their Thanksgiving. Okay, that's time. So I'm going to, I'll put just one more minute on the clock because I'd like you to just share briefly with one another about what that experience was like. Was it awkward? Did you feel like you had to interject? Were you very self-conscious as a speaker? Were you very self-conscious as a listener? Which part of this was hard for you? Like, I'm just would like you to just share briefly with one another for 1 minute about that. But the most important thing is please thank your partner for their attention and for their sharing. So 1 more minute. Thank you. Now, this next part of the sermon I'm calling Collective Attention, Places Where It's Honored. And there aren't that many of them that I could think of. There aren't too many places today where people gather and pay attention collectively without distractions or with minimal distractions. Here's a very partial list. I know there are some others that we could add to this list, but I think these are probably the ones that we're most likely to share in common with one another. Like, for instance, yoga studio is not on the list because I do yoga, but not everyone does yoga. There are theaters, number one, places where people see plays. Many other kinds of live performance fit in that category too. And in many places, that's the convention in movie theaters. Your phone stays away, you watch, you're present. Number two, theoretically, the classroom. But I'm a teacher, and in practice, as any teacher knows, I think, it is not actually like that. And it seems to be getting worse too. I'm going to risk sounding like I'm complaining for a moment because in the past few years, I've noticed changes in how my students behave in class. Some of them have those little wireless headphones in, like AirPods, while in class. They think I don't notice, maybe. Some of them have like long hair. I notice, I see, we see. It's worth noting that students have never paid the kind of attention that teachers want them to pay, right? To that extent, this complaint is not new at all. But it is, I think, unquestionable that the digital distractions have gotten worse. Research shows that students both, one, they know that their phones are a problem, and also two, are unable to self-regulate. Number three, sports events, but not like what you'd think, because people who are spectating in sports events are not paying that kind of attention, right? The convention, if we're watching a sports game, is that we can talk to our neighbor or our friend, or, they're quite loud. But for participants in the sports games, for the players or the coaches, or even the players who are on the sidelines, that kind of attention is sacred. I'll get to that in part 4. And the fourth and last place on this very short list is places of worship like this. Of course, the idea of paying collective attention is especially highlighted when it's a special ceremony or a service of some kind, like a wedding, a funeral, or a memorial service. But even on a regular Sunday morning, a day like today, people gather in places like this. They're collectively present. They collectively pay attention. It's scary for the person talking sometimes. But seriously, this is big. This is really special. And I say that this is really special partially because I've studied attention in an academic context and I know how it's in short supply. And partially I say that it's special because I'm someone who for most of my life was a nun. So a collective attention is not of this kind, is not something that I take for granted. I've talked so far about presence in the context of listening mindfully, either to one another or on the collective level, like as a group, for instance, right now. But there's another form of presence that's entirely individual. It's a form of doing, where we give our complete attention to an activity, whether that activity is a job or a hobby or whatever. It's a cognitive state that the psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi describes as flow. Some of you have heard of this. This part is called flow. Flow is a state of deep, focused immersion in an activity where a person feels fully engaged, often losing track of time, and it's also a state of total unself-consciousness. It occurs when the challenge of a task matches the individual's skill level, creating a balance that fosters concentration and also enjoyment. It's an incredibly pleasant state of mind in which to be. Key elements include clear goals, immediate feedback, and a sense of control. It's an optimal experience. The book is called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. It enhances creativity, performance, and well-being. It's often spoken of as being like in the zone. We maybe have spoken colloquially of being in the zone. I read that poem before, Short Order Cook, 1, because I like it, and I hope you would like it too, and isn't that reason enough? But 2, because it depicts a flow state. This guy with his 30 cheeseburgers and his 30 fries was in the zone. He was a skilled cook. He knew what he was doing. He knew the correct order in which things had to be done, but this was a task that pushed him to the limits of his skill as a chef, right? He couldn't it wasn't a simple thing that he could sort of be spacing out or paying attention to anything else, watching the TV. He had to focus entirely on this task ahead of him. His little dance of satisfaction at the end and his sense of satisfaction illustrates how it feels good to immerse ourselves completely in something like this. It's a form of presence. We don't often think of it as presence, but it is a form of presence. It's valuable, it's enjoyable, it's fulfilling. I got flow, what an early memory that I have was my college job working at the school's post office or mailroom, and there was a machine we called the meter machine. And what this machine would do is it had a conveyor belt and it would stamp the outgoing mail. So we'd get, this huge box of envelopes of letters going out from the bursar's office, or a huge box of envelopes going out from admissions or whatever. And this machine would send them through one at a time and stamp each one with the appropriate amount of postage. And operating this machine, it took some skill. It wasn't something you could just and not anyone could operate the meter machine. Probably anyone could with training, right? With a little bit of training, maybe not all that much, but it required that kind of mindful presence. And I also loved that there were 4-digit budget codes for each department. And after working there for a couple of months, I had most of these codes, committed to memory. So it's a box from the registrar's office. I'd just type in the 4-digit code from memory and then start sending the letters through. And if the machine, jammed up, I could easily fix that. It required immersion. And when I worked on that meter machine, the hours at the post office went by like that. It was incredibly pleasurable. But it's important to note that we can experience that flow state if we're distracted, if there's distractions that are interrupting our experience. You've got to be away from those attention robbers, right? The cell phones especially. Excuse me. And also the challenge level needs to be just right. You might have heard of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. If the challenge is bigger than one's level of skill, it's going to make you anxious or stressed. But if it's too easy, if the level of skill exceeds the challenge, you're going to get bored and distracted. It's just not enough to hold your attention. Excuse me. And this is now the last part. It's called bringing it all together, which in my experience is the real trick, especially for me. Presence is a vital thread. It connects how we engage with ourselves, with others, and the world around us collectively. So whether we're talking about the mindful awareness that is required to avoid doing unintentional harm in a casual interaction, like my chat with the balloon guy, or the gift of listening deeply to another person, as you all practice doing today, or the collective focus, the collective presence in places like theaters or places of worship, places like this. Presence can foster meaningful connection. It reminds us to move beyond distractions and self-focus to honor others' humanity, to honor others' stories. On an individual level, it also manifests as flow, that state of focused engagement where time dissolves and effort feels effortless. Balancing skill and challenge, eliminating distractions, can help us achieve flow. And together, all of those dimensions of presence, the personal, the interpersonal, and the communal, are, in my mind, one of the building blocks or one of the keystones or foundations of living the kind of fulfilled and connected life that I would like to live and that I wish for you as well. Thank you.
Please join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. Oh, you're closing words. Closing words. Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm glad there are two heads up here. So Siyahamba is our hymn of celebration. Some of you may know the words, but I made a promise to run through phonetically so that you can hear it. So say it after me. Siyahamba. Kukanyen Kwenkos. One more time, you're doing beautifully. Siyahamba Kukanyen Kwenkos. We are marching in the light of God. So please stand as you're able and join us in our hymn of celebration.
Thank you for your presence here this morning and for your attention. Both of those things are precious because you are precious. Earlier, I said I was going to invite you to explore with me the power of presence as a radical act of compassion in the world. The world right now is, of course, just as busy, just as distracted as ever. And recent events have made it, for many of us, harder than ever, especially for some. So there is a special need for presence, a presence that's motivated by compassion. I hope I've given you some thoughts about the different forms that presence might take and what each of those forms might do for us. May we extend our presence generously and our attention compassionately as possible in the weeks and months to come. And may the hungry have food, the cold, clothing, the wounded, healing, the lonely, companionship. May the wronged have justice, the proud, humility, and the penitent, mercy. And may all beings everywhere experience freedom, flourishing, and joy. Amen.